At james.crid.land, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist. This week, podcast measurement. More standardised than you'd think it is. It was interesting seeing one of the pieces of news coming out of Radio Alive, the radio conference in Australia recently. The Australian radio industry are putting together a podcast working group to, quote, spearhead the development of the growing podcast industry in Australia. Their press release says, quote, broadcast radio is highly regulated and audience measurement is tracked through the independently audited GfK Australian radio surveys. In contrast, the podcast industry is currently fractured with no standard measurement system in place. Well, that's not entirely true. I write a daily newsletter for the podcast industry, podnews.net, so perhaps I can help demystify things a little in terms of podcast measurement. Podcasting does have a standard measurement system in place. It rejoices in the name IAB Podcast Measurement Technical Guidelines version 2.0, which is normally shortened to IAB version 2, and it essentially monitors downloads of podcasts in a standard way. It's been broadly agreed by podcast hosts and advertisers alike, and both major Australian podcast hosts, Whooshkaa and Omni Studio, use IAB version 2 metrics to report to clients. IAB Australia's Audio Council, of which Commercial Radio Australia are a part, have also recommended that IAB version 2 be used in the Australian market as well, and they've released some guidelines reinforcing some of the work. The idea is that all podcast hosts should be measuring using IAB version 2 and should theoretically return the same numbers. To be fair, downloads are limited in usefulness. Some podcasts are downloaded but never listened to. Raw download numbers don't give demographic information either. But there is a global standard, and it's not fractured. So it's worthwhile comparing podcast measurement with broadcast radio's research. In Australia, there are 3 sets of broadcast radio research, not just one. Commercial Radio Australia mentions GfK, who are used for the metro areas, but they also produce other sets of research using Xtra Insights. Community Radio, well, they're not in either of these, so they have to commission additional work using McNair Ingenuity Research. And all 3 sets of Australian broadcast radio research return different numbers, and they're compiled using different methods. And they're not compatible either with radio research conducted in other countries. Indeed, there's no global standard for measurement of radio listening. A listener is one that listens for 5 minutes in some countries, 15 in another, listened yesterday in a third. Germany has no weekly figures at all. Ireland averages over the past 12 months. The UK averages over the last quarter, 6-month or 12-month period. Canada and the US have 2 systems. Many markets aren't even measured at all. The global radio industry is fractured, disastrously so, when you consider that Apple Beats One or Spotify have one global measurement standard to sell against them. The lack of standards means that it's really hard to compare radio in different countries. Take it from this global radio futurologist. So while podcasting has an agreed global standard, broadcast radio's research is fractured and there is no standard measurement system in place. So perhaps we should try and establish an international radio working group to see if we can fix this and spearhead radio's development. And perhaps we can include all radio in this, including community radio as well. I've written a full article on how podcast measurement works. You'll find it at podnews.net/articles, and it includes a comparison of radio and podcasting research. Nobody really comes out of that very well. You can get my weekly newsletter at james.crid.land and daily podcast news at podnews.net. And until next time, keep listening.